Hey, this is Patrick Arthur with Jazz Guitar Today, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the minor blues form. This is the second video in a series of videos I'm doing on different blues forms. So if you haven't seen the first one on the 3-chord blues, you may want to watch that because I'll probably be referencing to some things from there. Okay, let's get started. The big difference here from the last blues we talked about is obviously, as the title suggests, we're going to be dealing more with minor chords. Okay. If you're not familiar with what a minor chord is, it's the 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7 of a given scale. In today's example, we're going to be doing it in the key of C, so we'll have a C minor blues, which means our first chord would have the notes C, it's the 1, flat 3 would be an E flat, the 5 would be a G, and the flat 7 would be a B flat. Cool, so again, the notes in our C minor 7 chord would be C, E flat, G, B flat. And I'll be using kind of standard bar chord shapes for today's video. I'll have a little chart for these as well if you're not familiar with them. I'm hoping most people are, to move around, and these are movable chords, so we can just find a C on the A string and you play your C minor 7. I will have a video later on how to expand some chord voicings and inversions and things like that to get some different chord comping. Okay, so we're going to break this blues down into 3 4-bar phrases just like we did with the last blues. So it's still 12 measures long, just like the last blues we talked about. And really the first 8 bars of it are almost the same as our dominant chord blues apart from the chord qualities. Okay, so in the first phrase, our first 4 measures, we get the 1 chord, which is C, C minor, right? And then we get that for 1 measure, and then we go to the 4 chord, which is going to be F minor 7, okay, C, D, E, F, that's the 4th note of our C scale. We get that for 1 measure, and then we go back to a C minor 7 for 2 measures. So the first 4 bars would sound like this. 1, 2, ready, go. C minor 7, to the 4 chord, F minor 7, back to C minor 7. Another measure. Okay, and that's the first phrase. Easy enough, right? The second phrase, or the second 4 bars, is going to start on the 4 chord, which is F minor 7. It's going to have that for 2 measures, and then we go back to the 1 chord, C minor 7, for 2 measures. So that sounds like this. Ready, go. That's our 4 chord, F minor. Now we're going to C minor 7. Get another measure of that. Awesome. Okay. Now we get to some fun stuff. This is where this blues kind of deviates quite a bit from the previous blues we talked about. The next measure in our final phrase, our final 4 bars, starts on an A flat 7, dominant chord. Okay? If you need a refresher on dominant chords, that's spelled 1, 3, 5, flat 7. So notice the 3rd is major in this versus minor in the minor 7, right? So in the key of A flat, which is the chord we're on, we would have A flat is the root, that's 1. C is the 3rd, E flat is the 5th, and G flat is the flat 7. Okay, so this would be technically the flat 6 in the key of C, right? So let's think about just a C scale: C, D, E, F, G, A. Right? So we'd have to lower the 6th note of our scale down 1/2 step to end up with our A flat 7 chord. Okay, we get that for 1 measure, and then we go to a G7 chord for 1 measure. Right, which we saw in our last blues, and then C minor 7 for the last 2 bars. And if you were to repeat the blues, then you have a little 2/5 in there, which we'll talk about, and I'll throw in the PDF. But that is the basics of the minor blues. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this A flat 7 chord, because that's the one maybe weird thing you might be seeing versus the last blues we talked about. The A flat 7 chord has a job. Its job is to try to get us to G7. Okay? Dominant chords tend to do that. They function, it's functional harmony, so they tend to want to take us somewhere. We talked about it a little bit in the last video where the G7 wanted to take us back to the 1 chord. Right? If you hear a song, if I just play a simple C chord, I'll stay minor, so if I play a simple C minor chord, and then I play a G7, your ear should hear that it really wants to resolve back to C minor 7. Right? We'll do that one more time. If I was playing a song and ended on that G7, it might feel unresolved. Listen. Your ear should be screaming at you to go back to C minor. Right there, right? So that's dominant chords tend to do that. They want to push us somewhere. They want to take us somewhere. So this A flat 7 chord is actually pulling us to a G7 chord. And let's talk about how. Typically dominant chords, if we want to simplify it, are the 5 chord taking us to a 1. So the example I just played was a G7 taking us to a C minor. G is the 5th note of C. C, D, E, F, G, right? 5-1, the most common resolution in music. But you can also put a 5 chord in front of your 5 chord. Okay, so the 5 chord in our song, in our C minor blues, is G. We can approach that 5 chord with its 5 chord, okay, which would be the 5th note of a G scale. So let's walk up a G scale, G, A, B, C, D, okay? So we could put a D7 in front of our G7, which would then take us to a C minor 7, right? I know it sounds confusing, but I think when you see it, it'll hopefully make some more sense. And that would sound like this. D7 wants to take us to G, which wants to take us to C minor, right? We call these secondary dominants. And we could backcycle this as much as we want. That'll be a video for another day. You might be wondering, okay, that's D7. Where did the A flat 7 come from? A flat 7 and D7 share the same two, what I think of as chord descriptor notes, okay? And that's the 3rd and the 7th. Those to me are the most important notes of any chord, because the 3rd is going to tell us if the chord is major or minor, which is a very important quality to distinguish. And then the 7th will tell if it's a major 7 or a dominant 7, which again is a very important quality to distinguish our chords. So let's spell a D7 chord. It would be root, which is a D, 1, right? D. And then the 3rd is F sharp, okay, or G flat. That's going to be important in a second. We could also call that a G flat because it's the same, that black key on the piano, right? F sharp or G flat. Then we get A, which is the 5th, and then flat 7, okay? Let's take special attention to the 3rd and the 7th. So the 3rd was F sharp or G flat, and then the 7th was C, the flat 7, right? Now let's compare that to an A flat 7 chord. Let's spell an A flat 7. We have A flat, that's the root, C is the 3rd, okay? That note was in the D7 chord, you may have noticed that. The 5th was E flat, and then the flat 7 is G flat, which we could also call F sharp, but we're going to call G flat. Cool? So you notice the G flat or F sharp and C are shared in both chords, and it's the 3rd and 7th of each of those chords. Does that make sense? So that means we can use an A flat 7 to get us to a G7, because those same two notes, those are the two notes, the 3rds and the 7ths are the notes that pull us to the C, to the 5-1 sound, I should say. So those two notes are what create the dominant sound, right? Major 3rd, flat 7th. Those two notes are the same in a D7 and an A flat 7. We call this a tritone sub, because if we're thinking about it as a 5 of 5, that D7 to G7, we can go to the tritone of that D, and the tritone, I should explain, is the sharp 4 or flat 5 of a given scale. So if we go up D, E, F sharp, G, A, that's the 5th, right? If we lower that one note, or one half step I should say, we get an A flat. That's the tritone. So that's what we call a tritone sub, and that's really where the A flat 7 comes from. You don't necessarily have to know all that to play the minor blues, but if you know it, there are some other really cool things you can start doing when you comp or when you solo or whatever on this. So it's something I'll expand on in a later video, but that's just a kind of brief overview of where that A flat 7 comes from. It's really disguised. It's a disguised D7 chord, and that D7 is the 5 of G. Right, so I'll play the last 4 bars of this blues, and we'll get the flat 6 for 1 bar, the 5 for 1 bar, and then I'll play the 1 chord for 2 bars. Okay, 1, 2, ready, go. A flat, dominant, G7, finally to C minor 7. That would be the end of our blues. Cool. So as always, if you guys have any questions or anything related to this that you feel you want to ask me about, please shoot me an email. It's at patrickarthurmusic@gmail.com. And be on the lookout for the next video. Happy practicing.